It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
Hi, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. We've got a lot going on today. We are going to talk about Warren Buffett and his $1 million bet. You're going to want to stick around for that. We're going to talk about Mythicists of Milwaukee Conference and why I am not going. And then we're going to talk about Pennsylvania. They have a conference coming up in just a few weeks that you're going to want to go to. I see this as the big event of New England this season, I guess, this fall. So you're going to want to learn all about that and then go book your tickets. So we've got all of that coming up. And first, we are going to talk a little bit about Warren Buffett. So about 10 years ago, Warren Buffett made a 10-year bet, and he opened it up to the public, I guess, but to anyone specifically that ran a hedge fund. Now, I've talked about hedge funds on the show before and why they are inherently structurally unsuccessful, and you're not going to make the money that you think you're going to make. You're not going to make what you could make in the S&P, and the people that run hedge funds make millions, if not billions of dollars off of the investors' backs. And it's like another case where they make more than you do with your own money. They get paid on what's called 2 and 20. So they get 2% annually, and they get 20% of whatever you make. So if the market goes up 10%, they get 20% of that, or 2, plus another 2. They make 4. Now, in that case, you make 6 and they make 4. So they didn't make more than you. But again, it was all your money, so they made a good chunk. However, they don't do even that well. So Warren Buffett made this challenge, and only one person, and Warren Buffett was hysterical because he was throwing out things like, these are people who are managing millions and billions and tens of billions of dollars. Will not one of them put their own money on the line to bet that what they do is successful? Staggering, simple, right? Just, I dare you. I double dog dare you. I bet you $1 million freaking dollars that you can't do what you say that you do, and virtually no one would step forward. Well, one man did. Ted Sides, I think it's Sides, it's S-E-I-D-E-S. I'm going to say Sides. Correct me later if I'm wrong. He was a co-manager, at least he used to be, of a hedge fund company called Protege Partners. And they're one of the big dogs in the hedge fund world. And he agreed to this bet with Warren Buffett of $1 million each. They actually did buy some zero-coupon bonds at a discount, so it would be worth $1 million 10 years later. So now it is worth approximately $2 million. And, of course, all the money goes to charity. Neither one of them gets the money. But several people sent me links about this, and I said, well, the bet's not over yet because the bet officially does end on December 31st of 2017. And finally, after me telling the fourth or fifth person, I'll cover this after January when it's over, someone sent me the link to, let's see, what was the guy's name? Ted Sides, capitulating. He admitted that he lost, that he went down in flames, and he wrote a glorious post, I guess, article about why he lost and why it's all not fair, and it's hysterical. So we're going to go over some of his really, really sad and pathetic reasons. And the reason he could give up is that over the last almost 10 years since this bet was made in 2008, the S&P 500, which is what Warren Buffett chose to bet on, has made over 7% per year. The long-term historical norm is 10. Keep that in mind. We'll need that for later. Spoiler. And the 5 funds of hedge funds that Mr. Sides picked had a average compounded return, a whopping, you're going to love this, a whopping 2.2%. 2.2%. So it is comically bad. I mean, if you look at it as a portion, they're less than 1/3 the return. But when you compound it out in time, a $1 million investment in the S&P 500 turned into an $854,000 gain. In this fund of funds that Mr. Sides picked, it was only $220,000. So it cost you $630,000 or $63% loss compounded over the almost 10 years. And it's not even over, but he finally realized it's basically over. So this money goes to a charity called Girls Inc. of Omaha, which promotes and inspires young girls to be smart, strong, and bold through service and advocacy. Oh, that sounds pretty nice to me. I like that. But the real article you want to get is in what's called Bloomberg. It's like the Bloomberg magazine, Bloomberg News, and it's called Bloomberg View. So it's an opinion piece. And the title of it is Why I Lost My Bet with Warren Buffett. Subtitle, the S&P 500 had a great run as hedge funds lagged, odds that history won't repeat. And, of course, it's written by the loser, I guess, Ted Sides himself. And so we're going to go through some of the comedy that ensues in this little article. The extra fun part of all this is he numbered his points. I'll call them points for out of charity for now. He numbered them, so we're just going to look at them. Number 1, price matters. And he articulates that the stock market did seem relatively high to him in the beginning of 2008. And it turned out that maybe he was right, because 2008, the market lost 37%. So he went into this bet thinking he had a significant advantage, at least that hedge funds had a significant advantage to the S&P 500. And after the first year or so, it sure looked like he was right. But it was a 10-year bet. And that's the thing, is that what makes you the most money in the long run? So if you need money next year, you should not put it in the stock market. I don't think you should ever put it in a hedge fund, so I guess that applies. But he went on to say, when we made the bet in 2008, the S&P traded at the high end of its historical range. Now, that's not clear to me if he meant historical range of the price point of the index, which the S&P hits historical highs every few years. I mean, and so does the Dow. I mean, the Dow used to be 1,000, and it's now 12, 13,000, whatever it is. I don't follow it that way because I don't give a shit. I'm investing for the long run. So when people say, well, the market's at all-time highs, yeah, it was 5 years ago. Yeah, it was 10 years ago. Yeah, it was 15 years ago. It was 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. It's always getting new highs because stocks appreciate in value over time. I expect it to continue to have new highs. The question is, what is the rate of return? So he saw it as a historical high, unless he's talking about price-earnings ratio, which may or may not be the case. But he figured that was going to help him out. And so his first point is that the S&P was high, and that should have given him an advantage. Okay, so that means you lost why? Okay, so you thought you had better than even odds of winning, but you still lost, and you didn't lose by a little. You lost by a lot. So he's kind of insinuating that this won't happen in the next 10 years. That things will be different because stocks are still kind of high, either by the index price point or the price-earnings ratio of the collective. So I think he should double down and bet another $1 million with Warren Buffett. What do you think? That sounds like fun. Next, we go on to point number 2. Risk matters. ... Eventually. So in this point, he's arguing basically that by investing only in the S&P 500, which Warren Buffett does not suggest, by the way. It was just what he chose for the bet. The author is suggesting that that is more risky than hedge funds, and that hedge funds are better in the long run because when you look at risk and returns, it's a better investment. Well, he's full of crap. 2.2%? Are you freaking kidding me? 2.2%? I could have made 3 to 5% by being in bonds. I could have had way less risk than your hedge fund over the last decade than your miserable 2.2% return. And that's why I talk about all the time, if you're 20, 30, maybe even 40 or early 50s, what do you really care about the next 5 or 10 years of performance if you're going to retire at 62 or 65 or 67 or 70, depending on your situation? It's about the long-term growth. You've got to look past the short term. That's what the stock market does. As a famous poet once said, there is no try, there is only do, or something like that. Do or do not, there is no try. I think that's the Yoda quote. That's what the stock market is. You either do it or you don't do it. So the idea that hedge funds have less risk and that they happen to fall less in '08, which was true, they still did horrible, but not quite as horrible as the S&P 500. And part of that was because they had a lot of their money sitting in cash, which is very common in hedge funds because they're always looking for things to buy. And so as the market runs up year after year after year, normally, until it doesn't, of course, you're just sitting there with cash. So he's making an argument that I completely disagree with, but that wasn't his freaking bet. So wah to you, that doesn't count either. So 2 down. His next point, number 3, his title, A Passive Investment in the S&P 500 is an Active Bet. All right, little cutesy word games there. I'm kind of impressed. That's kind of clever. He is concerned that the S&P 500 only went up because it is trendy, basically is what he's saying. Now, the funny thing, we talk about on the show all the time, the long-term historical norm of the U.S. stock market and the Dow and the total stock market index and the S&P 500, because in the long run they all make about the same, give or take, is around 10%. Well, if you may recall a few minutes ago, I said that this averaged about 7%. So it actually did underperform the long-term norm. If it had made 10, it would have crushed him even more in his paltry 2.2%. But he's basically saying that you're betting on the largest stocks. Well, if you only pick the S&P 500, that would be true. But let's look at some of the other U.S. stock market indexes. And these numbers are going to be as of June 30th, so they're not exact as of the time he wrote this article, but you get the impression. The total stock market, which is large cap and small cap, 10-year average return, 10-year performance, 10-year compounded rate of return, ending June 30th of 2017, and we've talked about this on the show before, 7.37, almost 7.4. That's better than 2.2. All right, let's look at mid-caps. Mid-caps, 7.48, 7.5. Small caps, 7.83, 7.8. We're going to round it. So he's worried about being beaten by 7, and that's the large caps. Well, the small caps did 7.4 and 7.8, mid-cap and large cap, I mean. So it's even worse. So it's a terrible argument, and these things combined represent the entire United States stock market, which is what a hedge fund is going to primarily invest in, but he got crushed. So I don't know what exactly he's complaining about here, but that's 3 in a row where he loses. Number 4. Now here he says, we're not comparing apples to oranges, and comparing hedge funds to the S&P 500 is kind of disingenuous and not fair. Kind of really, expanding on point number 3. Well, the funny thing is, did he not know this or think this or believe this 10 years ago? I think this is post hoc justification of the fact that he lost, and he can't just freaking say, I lost. So he points out that hedge funds are not limited to just large stocks. They invest in small stocks and mid stocks. Well, we just covered that when I was reviewing point 3, so he's still wrong. And then he says, but hedge funds invest in the whole globe, around the world, and so it's not fair to compare a relatively good run in the United States compared to international investing. He may have a point here. He may have a point because international stocks have not performed anywhere near as well as the U.S. stock market in the last 10 years. The U.S. stock market, 7.3, 7.4, something like that. What did the international do? Nowhere near as close. I'm looking at it right here. The Vanguard Total International Admiral shares, again, this is for the 10-year period ending in June 30th of 2017, only returned 4.7%. So he's right. 4.7 is significantly lower than 7.4. And if you had 10, 20, 30, even 40% of your money in international, that would have created a combined overall drag on your return. And none of those things would be unreasonable because sometimes, just not the last decade, sometimes international funds do better than domestic funds. However, he doesn't point out in his article to the reader that's reading this that 4.7 is still way bigger than 2.2. What? So your excuse is that you didn't get beat by as much if you used a different index? Well, you didn't pick that index to compete with when you began, did you? And so now, I mean, if international had lost 10% per year for the last decade, he might have a point. But it didn't. It made 4.7. So if it was 100% international making 4.7, the hedge funds still made 2.2. They more than doubled this dramatically long-term, 10-year significant underperformance of the international stock index still kicked his ass, but he is using it as an excuse for why it's not a fair comparison. Oh, boo freaking who. Number 5. Now we just get nonsensical. It's titled, Number 5, In Investing and in Life, we live through only one experience out of many possibilities. So what he's basically doing here is he's comparing the 10-year bet to a hand of poker. That if you play one hand of poker, you might randomly win that hand, and the opponent against you might randomly lose. It's how you do in the long run. Well, I'm sorry. A 10-year bet does not seem to me to be like a random hand of cards that are given to you in a poker game. This is just crazy. And his position is basically, well, anything could happen in any 10-year time period. We're just as likely to win next time as we're not. And again, I think they should bet another $1 million. Sounds like great fun to me. But this is all a joke because we don't have just this incredibly small, in his perspective, one-time dealing of 10 years. We have the previous 10 and the previous 10 and the previous 10 and the previous 10. We have 200 years of data on the U.S. stock market and almost that same amount on international markets. Now, I will grant you, the data that's more than 100 years old starts to get a little sketchy, but it all points to the stock market making between 9 and 10% per year in the long run, and all the data that's available for hedge funds says that they do not. That's why Warren Buffett was able to make the bet. But this guy, of course, being in the industry, or at least he was at the time that he made the bet, is blinded by his own income. I don't remember the exact quote, but it's hard to convince somebody of something if their income depends on it. I've totally butchered that quote, but you know what I'm talking about. Number 6, long-term returns only matter if we invest for the long term. Yay, what a genius insight. Bravo. But unfortunately, you made a long-term bet, or at least a 10-year bet. You got to live and got to die by it. And then he points out that in the first year of the bet, they lost half as much as the S&P 500. Well, even that is not true. The S&P 500 went down 37%, and the funds that he picked went down 21, 22%. Not half, my friend, I'm sorry. Still did pretty well. A little bit of luck, but then they lost in 2009. They lost in 10. And 11, the market was only up a point or two, and they lost 5. They lost in 12. In 13, the market went up 32%, and they made 11. 14, the market went up 14, 12%, 13%, and they made 2 or 3. 15, they lost by a point or two. 16, they lost. And 17 so far, again, they're losing. So they've lost 9 out of 10 years, and some of them by 20%. And 1 year, They outperformed by about 15% when the market fell 37%. Now, how much of that is because of skill? How much of that is because they had cash on hand? Who knows? Maybe that's when the international helped them out. I haven't looked at that detail. But so he's talking about long-term only matters in the long term. Well, great. You didn't bet anything other than 10 years, so you've got to live with that. The other thing, of course, if you are a short-term investor, you shouldn't be in the stock market. He does point out, truthfully, that not everybody would have the courage to stay in the market when it went down 37% in 2008. Hopefully, if you're a regular listener to this show, you would know that is the right thing for you to do. It might even be, and this is where I'll give one of the warnings, nothing I say is actually specific personal advice to any individual listener. Please seek out your own guidance and professional advisor before taking any action. At the bottom, when the market had fallen 37% in 2008, or somewhere around there, one could, if one had a generous portion of their money in the cushion because they were close to retirement, if you had flexibility in your income, in your situation, if you had other assets, if you had the possibility of continuing to work a few more years, you could kind of, in a way, double down even. And you could take some of the money out of bonds and put it in the stock market if you were really courageous. Not necessarily the right thing to do for anybody, but one could do that. But you definitely don't want to pull out when the market loses 37%. So I was hoping there would be more points, something that would actually be valid, but he had these 6 points, and all 6 of them either point to he thought he had a better than even chance because he was taking the bet at a time that was opportunistic for him. He thought that maybe the market would underperform. It did, 7% versus 10, still crushed his 2%. He blames international. He blames the fact that the S&P 500 is not small cap or mid cap U.S., which all still crushed him, including the international. He said that it's a one-time thing. It won't happen again. What happens all the time with the market versus hedge funds? Hedge funds significantly, dramatically underperform whatever they're compared against. It's embarrassing, but yet they still make millions, if not billions of dollars managing them, and people invest in them because for some reason they sound cool to them. So that's going to wrap up the Investing Skeptically segment for this week. Next week, my intention is to go into something a little more, maybe a lot more complicated, and some math. I have just gotten my hands on a new report that it's a lot to read, and I'm going to have to try to pick out some things that aren't too mathy because it has complex formulas that I'm not even sure I understand looking at them on paper, let alone trying to relate them on the radio. But it talks about what portion of stocks out of the thousands and thousands of stocks that are available, what portion of stocks actually account for the long-term returns of the U.S. stock market. And it seems to be an incredibly small amount. And so we're going to talk about that next week and the comparison of stock returns versus what's considered to be a risk-free 1-month U.S. Government bond return. So I'll have to start by talking about what their benchmark is, 1-month U.S. Treasuries. We'll talk about those for a while, and then we'll get into some of the meat of this study. It's absolutely fascinating. But we're not going to take a break. We're going to go into my discussion about Mythicist of Milwaukee Conference, and then we'll have our interview about Pennsylvania, and that's Karen Sloane. We're going to talk to her about their conference, and they're raising money for food to help people that are a little bit hungry and helping a food bank. So stay right there.
And of course, the performance that people first got to know you was as Smeagol, a golem.
Absolutely.
Tremendous. Not only are you doing that, but you're doing 2 different characters, you might say, 2 different sides. I wonder if I could ask you a favor.
Yes.
Is that I have here, where do I have it? I have it right here. I would love it if I could hear either Smeagol or Golem.
Okay. Or both.
Read these tweets by Donald Trump.
The fake news media has never been so wrong or so dirty. Purposely incorrect stories and phony sources to meet their agenda of hate. Sad.
Just you can lose this one. Just that one if you don't mind. Yeah.
Despite the constant negative press kerfuffle. Wait! What's kerfuffle, Precious?
No one knows. That's the most beautiful thing.
I find myself in the position where I want to talk about something that I normally don't discuss in any way on the show, and it's not really something I want to do, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to talk about a conference. It's Mythicists of Milwaukee. If you're listening to the show soon after it comes out, it's not yet happened. If you're lucky enough, it's already over. It's no big deal. And I guess the short is I am not going to this conference, even though I had planned to, and I had even planned to table there. If you don't want to hear all the details, skip forward 5 or 6 minutes, because that's probably all this is going to take me. But I just wanted to kind of give a little walkthrough of my thought process on this. A couple of the speakers are people that I find at best disinteresting to me. It's not my thing, and possibly wrong about multiple topics that I would disagree with them on. And then if I go a little further, probably just downright offensive and potentially problematic in the misinformation that they spread. The first one, and these are in order of my concern, is Armored Skeptic. Armored Skeptic, I watched, by the way, I spent about 8 hours watching videos from these three people. Not something I recommend you do, but before I commented on them, I wanted to at least have a chance to have an educated opinion. I am not an expert on their material in any way. Like I said, 8 hours in total, so I don't know everything about them, and maybe I have some things wrong, and that's fine. It happens. I make mistakes. Armored Skeptic is a quick-cut, cheeky video where he picks apart other people's YouTube videos. First of all, this is a style that I do not appreciate, and that's okay. I don't have to. It's not something that I want to watch, just like I would not watch videos of someone else playing a video game for hours on end. I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you, dear listener. If that's something you like, that's cool. And if this is something you like, that's cool too. You can watch it all you want. It would have been a minute or two in, and I would have moved on if I wasn't doing research for this purpose, for the show, for an attempt to educate you about what I think about this. It became very difficult for me to find out what he actually stood for because he spent a lot of time just attacking anybody and everybody. One of the things that did worry me is that the Mythicist Milwaukee conference said that this is a YouTuber who focuses mainly on religion. I had a really difficult time finding his opinion on religion. At some point, I think I did find out that he is a non-believer, and maybe even identified as an atheist. But the vast majority of the videos seem to be designed just to be something to cause drama for the sake of drama. Pick a video from someone you disagree with. If it's a highly rated, highly viewed video, even better. And you take samples out of it, 5, 10 seconds or less, and attack it. Point out their logical fallacies. Point out every little thing that they're wrong. And a lot of times, the things that he's pointing out that are wrong in the videos, I agree with him. The stuff that he picked out, possibly out of context, are indeed wrong. So that's great and all, but then sometimes seconds or minutes later, he would do a similar or a slightly different logical fallacy in his own presentation. But I did find it very hard to find out where he stood. And when I did find out where he stood on issues, like I said, I disagreed. Probably the single biggest things had to do with the alt-right, opinions of the alt-right. I'm a little mixed on his position on that, so I'm not sure. He says he's a liberal. Fine, I'll take his word for it. But he definitely had positions on feminism, and the one thing that he said that really struck me is that there is no longer a systemic problem in society with women being oppressed or women being seen as lesser than men. I guess maybe, depending on how you parse the semantics, if he means that not in every case and every single time are women at a disadvantage, he may have a point. However, you don't have to be at a disadvantage every single time you do something to be at a lifelong disadvantage. So I really had problems with that. The second one I listened to was Shoe on Head, who apparently is the girlfriend of the Armored Skeptic. Very similar style, quick cuts, tearing apart other people's videos. And I have some samples from her just because I listened to a lot of hers, and apparently she gets the most views, sometimes over 1 million for a video. And it's just quick cut, biting, sardonic attitudes, attacking other people's videos, and not really standing for anything. And it's not just me saying this. She said this, which is why I loved her thing, because at some point she did actually express her opinions. So I want to play a sample here for you.
You are part of an ideology. We're just anti-thing. We're like not a thing. We're nothing. So we don't have to answer for other people who identify differently to us. I don't identify as anything. I really don't. I can't think of something that I actually identify as. So there's not like I have to answer for anybody who's in my ideology because I'm not in one. I am not an activist of any kind. I am just a idea debunker. I rage in front of a potato webcam about things I don't like.
So it appears that she's happy to say that she is not an activist. She doesn't really have a position on anything. And she's just making videos to debunk people that do say things, which, again, is fine with me if that's what you want to do. But it also tells me, why do I care? Why do I want to listen to this person? They apparently don't have a position, although they express them. That's just a little harder to get to. And they don't feel the need to debunk or to defend themselves because they don't hold an ideology. They are not ideology-driven. They're just pure, rational people that have all the answers to things. So I found that bothersome as a position. But again, if they're perfectly happy to say that they're not an activist and they don't hold an ideology, that's great. Why do I want to see you as a speaker at a conference? That might be okay, again, if you had one of them, but we have 3 of these people that are similar in nature, back to back to back, and I don't know that I'm going to be very interested in that. But she does go on and then give very explicit positions on what she thinks about feminism in specific. So I want to make sure that we cover that here for a second. So I'm going to play a soundbite from that.
It's mostly personal issues, petty issues, first world problems, things like being complimented, being catcalled, things that have been debunked like the wage gap, the pink tax. A lot of what third wave feminism is about is nothing, and that's the issue. Back then, they actually had reasons to be angry, not being able to vote and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed. I'd want to vote. Now, no. I don't even think I'm voting this election. I'm just spitting in the face of all those feminists back then. Lovely.
So if I can summarize, basically, women had reasons to be upset when they couldn't vote, and now they can vote, so they're not discriminated against. That's their definition of discrimination. Problem solved. The other thing that she mentioned explicitly, which I have actually talked about on the show in the past, and I will put it on the top of my list to readdress again, is the wage gap issue. I heard this on hers and the other 2 speakers that the wage gap issue has been debunked and women do not make less than men. I will go into details of why that is false for her to say. I fully accept, and it has been documented by reputable organizations over and over and over again, that women, even in the same exact industry and the same exact job, sometimes, on average, make less than men. I don't know if you want to call that a systemic problem, or it's an individual problem case by case, and there's just a lot of them. And it's not always the case. Are there situations that a woman makes more than a man in the same job? I'm sure. But I think the other case is more likely. And I'm not discounting one by talking about another. If you had any doubts that this was a person who's taking themselves seriously, or has serious points, or an ideology of some kind to present, I have one little last fun soundbite for you.
If someone right now was like, oh, she seems like a very smart activist, I am going to check out her Twitter, the first thing they will see is, what if butts had boobs?
So she herself recognizes that she is not a serious person. The videos are just made for fun. They're lighthearted, comical in her opinion anyway, but they do occasionally slip in comments that are anti-feminism, often anti-liberal, at least the liberal I see. They consider themselves to be liberal, if not centrist, so that they are offended by being called alt-right. And I'm going to take their word for it that they're not alt-right, that they're liberal. But again, not videos I would normally watch. Now, what does this have to do with the conference? Well, they are the bulk of the speakers. Seth Andrews was going to be a speaker for a while, and originally he wasn't. And that's a complicated issue that I'm sure he's going to cover, but he has decided to not go. And Seth Andrews and several other well-known atheist podcasters, bloggers, video people, videographers, video YouTubers, I guess is the phrase, were asked to come, and their rooms and airfare was paid so that they could come see a movie. And so they were all considered special guests for the premiere of the Batman and Jesus movie. I have seen short clips of this in the past because I have actually given a talk within the last year at Mythicist of Milwaukee, and I've seen clips of this movie, and I'm very excited to see it. And if it turns out as good as I think it's going to be, I will be happy to support them in what they do. Another thing to keep in mind is Mythicists of Milwaukee have not held themselves out to be an atheist group. So they are not obliged, nor do I think they should be, to have atheist speakers or to talk about religion or atheism. That's not necessarily their thing. So I don't have a problem with them doing whatever they want to do. And I don't have a problem per se with them having these speakers, but it was kind of presented as a follow-up to their first three conferences, which were primarily about religion and the historicity of Jesus, as a continuation of that philosophy, which was one of the reasons I was going to go, to see some more of that. And instead it became what it was promoted as, instead of that, a debate about social issues. Well, it's not really much of a debate, because there's not a debate set up on this topic. There is a debate set up on Islam, but there's not a debate set up on social issues. There's speakers, and even when Sargon is on with Thomas Smith is the interviewer, and I'm sure the original intent is that he becomes the foil for Sargon, but as someone who interviews people, at least for me, it's not normally my intent to debate with somebody. So I find the conference to not be something that's in my wheelhouse, something I don't really want to go see, something I don't think that I will enjoy going seeing. You may have a wonderful time, and you are free to go. I'm not asking you to not go. I might be accused of attempting to deplatform a speaker. I am not asking Mythicists to uninvite any speakers. I'm not involved in any of that activity. I am just saying I am not going, and I wanted to lay out for you the reasons that I am not going. But I do also feel the need to go and address, if I dare, the other side, the other extreme. There are people who consider themselves probably liberals and part of the progressive movement and social justice warriors, which sometimes is used as a pejorative and sometimes people embrace it, fine, that have actually been actively involved in trying to undermine the conference. A couple of people, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not even going to throw out names because I don't have confirmation that they've done this, but I think they've mentioned it on their own platforms, called the facility that was hosting this event and informed them that violence was going to happen at the event in an attempt to undermine the event and cause its collapse. That is not acceptable. I find that to be deplorable. You are not allowed to go and undermine someone else's conference and speakers because you don't like them. If you don't like them, have your own conference. If you don't like them, you can do what I'm doing and not go. If the Mythicists of Milwaukee have topics and speakers that I find more interesting to me in the future, I reserve the right to attend in the future. But this conference in particular does not interest me, and I'm not going to go. We have to make a very clear line, at least I have to make a very clear line, that violence or threats of violence are not acceptable. If you personally are at risk or your life is at risk, that's different. I mean, everything has its exceptions. So I wanted to cover some of those things. If you live in a world where you've never heard any of this stuff before this podcast, I'm very happy for you. And I kind of wish I was in that world and just could do my thing. And a lot of this, I get the dodge because I'm very busy. It just kind of has come to a head and it's on multiple people's Facebook feeds. So I got a little concerned about the conference, and I had to do a lot of research so that I knew a little something about what I was talking about, and I made the decision to not go. If you want more details, Seth Andrews on his Facebook page published a statement of why he is not attending, and you can read that, and I agree with the vast majority, 99% of what he said there, so that'll give you some more information. And again, this segment went way longer than I thought. I have that happen a lot. So now we'll go and talk about something different. All right, everybody. With me now I have Karen Sloane, and she wanted to come on and talk about Atheists Fighting Hunger. Karen, talk to me. What's going on?
Well, we have the Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Convention coming up in October. Starts on Friday the 13th.
Ooh.
And we always like to wrap in a service project with that. So Brian Fields put his head, talked to some people. And the last time we had the PastaCon conference was in 2015. And we raised over $7,500, and we fed over 30,000 people because the meals are 25 cents a meal.
How do you get a 25-cent meal?
I'm sorry?
How do you get a 25-cent meal?
Well, it's amazing. We work with a nonprofit called Outreach, and the meals are dried beans, and then we vacuum seal them. So it is inexpensive when you buy it in bulk like that. And I'm not sure exactly how the people at Outreach get the food so cheap.
Yeah, so this is basically one of those things where you're buying an entire pallet of food product that can be mixed with water, cooked down, and provide nutrition for a family.
Exactly. And it was really fun in 2015 because, well, actually every time that we've done it, it's been extremely fun because the speakers hang around. And then you're standing there next to maybe some people that are your heroes or some people that you've been following for a long time. Seth Andrews has participated, Kevin Davis of Young Skeptics, of course, Aaron Ra, Matt Dillahunty, the Barroom Atheist. We have all kinds of, quote, celebrities who stay and help us out. Mendissa from Black Nonbelievers helped and things like that. So it's really fun, too, because you get to stand shoulder to shoulder with our speakers and entertainers and get to know them and do something really wonderful at the same time.
And you said again that's October, and it starts the 13th, Friday the 13th. What are the odds?
Yeah. Well, they did it that way on purpose this year. There's a word for people who are afraid of Friday the 13th. I can't pronounce it.
Triskaidekaphobia.
Yeah, that's the one. And we are having a party that Friday for that. So,
and this is where in the country?
It's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Philadelphia. You know, some of the world's best gelatos in Philadelphia.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I went down to, it's not called, the Italian Market, which is barely any Italian left to it. I checked that out, and then I wandered the streets for a while, and I found really, really good homemade local gelato.
Why are you trying to make me hungry?
I could use some gelato. I when I was in Italy, I ate that twice a day, every day, and I lost weight.
Really?
Yeah, I figured I'd write a book called The Italian Diet. You could eat anything you want as long as you walk 10 miles.
Well, there's that.
So this is coming up in a month, October 13th through 15th. And when is the food packing thing going to be? That's on the 15th, or is that the next day?
No, it's on Sunday the 15th, and we usually start around noon. I'm not sure if we have the specific time yet. If so, no one has told me what it is.
That's all right. That's all right. It'll be a big surprise. And
yes, it's usually between noon and 2 that we start, and it takes a lot less time than you would think. But you were definitely tired when you're done.
I've done that a couple times at the local food bank. It's good fun. And you guys have a fundraising goal of $10,000?
Yes. When we did it in 2015, we raised $7,500. So
okay, so you're going to top that, hopefully, right?
We
Fingers
hope
crossed.
to.
And where can my listeners donate? Because I have really wonderful listeners.
It's atheistpa.org/donations.
Okay.
And then you'll be right on the Atheists Fight Hunger page, and you can choose your event, your amount to pay and all that. So,
and if someone wants to go to the Pennsylvania conference, what is that called, and where do we learn more information?
At atheistpa.org. It's called PastaCon, Pennsylvania State Atheist Humanist Convention.
Yeah, it's got a whole bunch of lower and upper cases randomly mixed in. That's weird.
They're not randomly mixed in. It's just the T in state to make it a word. P-A-S-T, small t, A-H for Atheist Humanist.
Con. Fantastic.
So it's pasta with an H, con.
Now, do you know about the speakers for that event?
Oh yeah. We have some awesome speakers. I'm really, really excited about this. Some of these, I've been dying to talk to some of these people. For one thing, I'm helping organize the travel, so I've been very fortunate in that I actually get to speak to some people, and I'm not going to tell you on here who I'm fangirling over. And I'm sure they'll figure it out when we're at the conference, and I'm standing there going, hi. All right, so one of my perennial favorites is Cy Babe, Yvette D'Entremont. She'll be speaking. I'm really looking forward to listening to her. You know, she debunks food myths and that kind of thing. Additives in food that are terrible. And I'm sure, it's that time of year, so I'm sure everybody remembers that meme about how horrible the Starbucks pumpkin spice coffee is. And I'm sure you've seen that. And the same thing with like the Diet Coke. And in addition to her writing in-depth articles, she also debunks things like that. David Silverman, I think most people know who he is.
Sure.
He is the president of American Atheists, and he's always extremely entertaining. One thing I'm very excited about is Callie Wright. She's the host of the Gaytheist Manifesto podcast. She is trans, and she just had bottom surgery. She told us about a little bit at an earlier conference this year, and now she's ready to talk about it. And her speech is called My Vagina, a Love Story.
Okay, sure.
And Callie's delightful. She's delightful. And I think people will really, really enjoy her.
Yeah.
Of course, the Friendly Atheist is going to be there, too. Hemmant. We're looking forward to seeing him. I'm not exactly sure what his topic is off the top of my head, though. I'm really sorry.
That's all right. It'll always be good, so that at least you know that.
And Lawrence Krauss, Heather Henderson, and Emery will be there. They do a podcast. They Ardent Atheist and Skeptically Yours. They're very interesting. They're going to do a live podcast, so we'll all get to take part in that.
Very nice.
Alex Jules, he's an organizer for the Black Non-Believers of Dallas, and he's also he's a writer, activist, commentator. He speaks about race, religion, politics. He's a very nice person. He's a Brooklyn native, so he doesn't pull any punches, which I frankly love. And he's great. I'm really looking forward to hearing him speak as well. Gail Jordan, she left her faith. She's a Southern Baptist. And then she realized, what? And now she is a speaker, and she can speak to about what happens when you leave your faith. It's more traumatic if you leave your faith, and it's sort of a closed circle like Southern Baptists. She's going to talk about that, which I'm very interested to hear. She still has some after effects, which a lot of people do when they leave religion. It echoes in their life for years, and it's also very complicated if you have family who have not left.
Indeed.
Leanne Lord, she is a co-host of Star Talk with NDT.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure of seeing him when he was in Hershey in the spring, and it was fantastic.
Yeah,
and
he's quite a good talker.
He is. So I'm looking forward to that. She's got that wicked sense of humor. And that's just a taste. We have a pretty varied group. Our MC is Mark Nebo. He's been our MC before.
Right.
Anyone who knows Mark, he's got the Be Secular and the Normalize Atheism that he does. And he's very entertaining. He's friendly. He's just a decent guy. He's a very good guy. So I'm looking forward to him being there.
That sounds like a fantastic time. I wish I was there myself. So for the listeners, it's atheistspa.org. You go there and you can learn about the conference, October 13th and 15th. You can learn about...
13th through the 15th.
What did I say?
You said 13th and 15th. We're not going home on Saturday. That's when most of the people are speaking.
Wow. All right. Well, October 13th through 15th is the conference in Philadelphia. And then on the 15th is going to be packing meals, hopefully 40,000 of them. But to do that, you need $10,000. So if you can't go, you can also go to atheist, without an extra S, pa.org, and you can donate some money. Every dollar counts. They hope to raise $10,000. And with that, they can create 40,000 meals.
You can come to Atheists Fight Hunger whether or not you pay to come to the conference.
An important note. Excellent.
Yes. So you can just pop on by, meet some of our speakers, get your hands dirty, and have a good time without paying a dime.
Excellent. Well, Karen, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
My father, the man responsible for my education, taught me that Islam, rightly understood, is a religion and philosophy of peace. In fact, he said that for any society to be peaceful and prosperous, it had to institute the rule of God, or Sharia. I came to disagree with my father. It was a gradual process that started when I entered and lived in societies such as the Netherlands and the United States that applied man-made constitutions and laws. Both countries are peaceful and prosperous. I now disagree even more with my father that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the amount of security that is deployed tonight here, the amount of security that is deployed for the Richmond Marathon. 6 months ago, the Boston Marathon was bombed by two brothers who invoked the founding documents and the founding father of Islam. I disagree with my father when I look at the wanton killing of the Westgate Mall in Nairobi by Somali men invoking Allah and Muhammad to justify their horrid act. Kenya is the most hospitable country to Somalis fleeing their own country. So it distresses me even more. I disagree with my father when I look at the reports this week of 30 men and women worshipping in Iraq who are killed by a suicide bomber invoking the very same God and the very same prophet that they invoke. I disagree with my father when he says that Islam is a religion of peace. When I look at the 120,000 dead in Syria, Syria is now a stage of a proxy war between Islam's two most important and most influential nations, the Sunni Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Shia Islamic Republic of Iran. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read about the almost daily reports of the destruction of churches, the pillaging of Christian property, the rape of Christian women, the terrible exodus of Christians and other religious minorities from Muslim countries. All this is done by men who invoke the founding father and founding documents of Islam. I disagree with my dear beloved father when I read about the teenage girl in Pakistan who's shot point blank in the head by a man invoking Allah and Muhammad because she wanted education. In the name of Allah and Muhammad, women are forbidden to drive. They're forbidden to own their own reproductive rights. They're forbidden to do anything unless they have permission from a male guardian. I disagree with my father that Islam is a religion of peace when I read these founding documents and I study the history and the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In there, I find an insistence of war and intolerance towards infidels, the hypocrites, those who associate God with others, homosexuals, women, and so on.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
Well, we are getting to that point in the show where we need to wrap up. Again, I was hoping to be under an hour, but it just sometimes doesn't work out like that. So you get what you get. Hopefully you enjoyed all the segments today. I guess we kind of had 3 of them. One last thing that I want to talk about, and I had this on my Facebook wall, but it kind of imploded, and it really kind of bummed me out, actually. It's this talk about punching Nazis. I just want to make it perfectly clear that my position is that Nazi philosophy is evil, and it should be, I don't know, crushed, I guess, as a concept. I don't think we should go hit people, however. This is not the strategy to success. First of all, it is a crime. It's assault. You shouldn't do it. Second, you change the narrative. You actually feed into possibly the Nazi, or if you want to make it even further, the alt-right or neo-Nazi possible conspiracy narrative that they're under attack, because they can point and say, look, I was just walking down the street and I got attacked. So you're not helping that way either. The other thing is then it gets into the news, and it could possibly, for some people, unfortunately, make the Nazi look like a bit of a victim because they're the one getting punched and knocked down. We don't need that narrative. We don't need that in the news. The news is not fair to all sides concerned. It's not going to play the narrative the way you want it. They're going to do what feeds media views. And there are going to be some people who see that as a Nazi being attacked, and they're the ones who are the victims. It doesn't help. Aside from that, I don't want anyone else to get the idea that it's okay to punch people, whether it's because you disagree with them, whether because you think they have bad ideas, or like a recent study said that 1 out of 7 Americans think that atheists are untrustworthy, and a large part of them might even think that atheists are evil. There are actual people in the United States of America that think that atheists are attempting to ruin the American way of life, the Christian way of life, because it's Christian America, and that maybe they are justified in hitting an atheist because an atheist is evil. An atheist eats babies. Atheists are denying God. It doesn't have to be a rational thought process, but if they have this distorted view of what an atheist is, and they think atheists are harmful and evil, and they are shown in the media by atheists that it's okay to punch people who you think are evil, are they then justified in doing the same? I don't think it's a road I want to go down. I definitely don't ever want to be in a position where my freedom of speech is taken away by someone else's fist. I put something like this on Facebook. Maybe I could have worded it better, but the attacks that I got were blistering, and it really, really kind of bummed me out. Matter of fact, it resulted in me unfriending about 10 people, unfollowing several more, and for now, my Facebook wall is friends only, not public. It was public for a couple of reasons. One, I'm a shameless attention whore. Two, I think that I have a pretty safe position where I can talk about atheism and the stupid shit in religion, like the news story that just came out of England where kids were beaten and made to eat their own vomit in a school that was taking care of homeless kids. That's what we should be talking about on a regular basis. I'm not saying don't talk about Nazis. Don't ignore Nazis and don't underestimate their ability. We have to work on reducing their power and their voice. And I don't mean by deplatforming them. That's also something I'm not a big fan of, as you may have figured out from my Mythicist of Milwaukee part. But we could push for more public schools and less private schools. That's one thing. There are private schools that are teaching distorted views of history where the South was a noble cause. That gets to this whole statue thing. And I'm conflicted about that, too. I'm leaning towards they should come down, at least a large part of them, but not by citizens' hands. It has to be done through the process. There's other things we can do. If Nazis' speech is bad speech, we need more good speech. So we need to find ways to get into the media to talk about how wrong they are, how evil they are, and the ideas that they spread are bad for everybody, including themselves. That's how, and maybe there's other ways. I haven't really given this deep thought, but punching is not one of them. And as someone said on my Facebook wall, which got them banned immediately, well, if not punching, then let's just start killing them. Okay, so you're going to fight an ideology that possibly includes killing people for their belief system by killing people for their belief system. What the fuck is wrong with you? That's not how we do it. If you want a longer rant on this, I was recently on, or maybe I will recently be on, we already did the interview, David Smalley's show, Dogma Debate, where we talked about this, both he and I, at length. So if you enjoyed the last 5 minutes, you can go get half an hour of it over there. The other thing that I'm going to cover on Dogma Debate probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and this is going to be an exclusive for David for allowing me to be on his show because he does get way more listeners, and it's a new audience. You guys hear me all the time. I will cover it here after his show puts it out, but I'm going to tease it here, and you can go listen there or back here when I cover it. My personal opinion, and this might blow some of your minds, is that corporations should pay a 0% tax rate in the United States of America. That's right. Just to be clear, corporations should pay a 0% tax rate. Now, that does not stand alone in isolation. There's conditions and parameters that apply to that, and I'm going to go over that on David Smalley's show, Dogma Debate, hopefully in a few weeks, and I will cover it here. So if for whatever reason you don't want to listen to another podcast, I'll get to it eventually, but it's a little tease. You can go check it out there. There were no new reviews on either iTunes or Stitcher, so if you listen via one of those mediums, please go give me a review, hopefully a positive one. A nice 5-star review would be nice, and I look forward to that. That helps the show spread. That helps iTunes justify occasionally putting my show on a front page or recommending it to other listeners. So views and reviews, all of that helps their little model. To the best of my knowledge, I don't actually know the details of how it works. Other couple quick things coming up. I'll have more details on these probably next show. As I said, I will not be going to Mythicist Milwaukee, but I have now confirmed that I will be going to the Pennsylvania conference that we talked about earlier in this show. So if you're going to that, please say hello. If you're not going to it and you live somewhere east of the Mississippi, why not? You should go. It's an amazing list of speakers, and it's a community building event, not something where we're going to debate things that are outside of secularism and free thought. So please join me in Pennsylvania. I think, yes, Philadelphia, precisely. My wife and I might get there a day early. I found a place that has really, really wonderful gelato in Philadelphia, and we're going to try to go there and maybe see some sites and statues and stuff. And I've also confirmed that I will be going to CSI, that's CSI convention, in Las Vegas. It is basically the phoenix from the ashes of TAM, the Amazing Meeting. So if you liked the Amazing Meeting, if you liked the kind of speakers and the kind of presentations and the emphasis on skepticism and the feel of being at Las Vegas, it's Excalibur, right there on the south end by the MGM Grand in New York, and Tropicana, all on that corner there. It's going to be right there. So you can see some sights. You can see Vegas if you gamble. That's unfortunate, but you can do some gambling. Maybe go a day early or stay a day late. Do some see a show. As always, if you're at one of these events, please feel free to come up and say hello. I always welcome that. And I guess I'll just wrap up the extra long show. That was going to be a short show. Shit happens. And I will see you next week here, or maybe in a few weeks, in either Philadelphia or Las Vegas. Until then, ciao.
Put your hands in the air and let that shoulder hang. I'm going global, cause you don't know me. I'm buying babies like Angelina Jolie. So quit that hugging and slow down, mama, and hit my fist like President Obama. Now, Democratic ship in the Congress, Republic. Democratic ship in the Congress, Republic. Democratic ship in the Congress, Republic. Oh, give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider, filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. married man. You know I can't hold hands. Front hug all day long with no other demands. But I ask for all of you until you say I do. No front hugging on PDA or your EG time is through. But some of y'all are slick, try to pull this trick. Your hug starts from the side, but soon it turns legit. So if you end up here, then go ahead and scream it. When I hug people, I leave room for the Holy Spirit. If a girl walks up with her arms spread wide, and she's front hug down without looking her eyes, you better turn to the side, pat her on the back. Jesus never hugged. Buddy like that, screaming. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side